Kutchers Run, Stage 5. This is 2.27 miles, same as Stage 3. Oh, which means we can broadcast. Okay. Okay, we are broadcasting. There you go.
Okay,
Hey.
13:08.
Sound? Yes, please.
Okay, I'll count you down. My clock is broken, so.
Okay.
I'm right on. So.
Okay, thanks. We are armed. This is a 450, stay left over crest 50, right 5 plus, over crest go 350.
I didn't hear that.
Left over crest 50, right 5 plus, over crest go 350. 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Stay left over crest 50, right 5 plus, over crest go 350. Small, 350. Small crest into a right 6 plus, into a left 4 short, into turn left 2 plus, no cut. Repeat, left 4 short, into a turn left 2 plus, no cut, go. 400. 4 to 2. 2, 2, 2.
Thanks.
400. This is shakedown. Stay left over flat small crest commit 50. Stay right over flat small crest 150. Stay right over flat small crest 100. Stay left over small crest 100. Jump 120. Keep going. Right 5 plus long. Into a left 5 minus long. Camber. Go. 200. Repeat. Left 5 minus long. Camber. Go. 200. Very long small crest. Into a caution small jump. Into turn right 3 plus. Camber loose. Keep going. Okay. Here's your right 3 plus, camber loose, 70. Small crest 50. Left 6 plus, 150. Left 5 plus, long. Into a right 4. Into a very long crest. Into finish, into a left 6 over small crest 100, keep it in. Okay. Good job.